Hello and welcome to Lightways at Life Astrologer with me, Anna Isabel, and what a delight. Trav Travis is with me today. You know, you have a bit of a tongue twister there.
My name's actually William Travers, but no one ever called me William because I grew up in Scotland. It would be Wally. So it's a school nickname that just stuck.
Well, it's a tongue twister. I'm going to say it again properly. Trav Travis is with me today.
Excellent. Hello, Anna. Thank you for having me again.
Oh, well, it's always a pleasure to chat with you. And I'm intrigued because when I suggested a topic to you for you to come back and discuss, you came back and said, no, I think I'd really like to talk about the seven ages. And I thought, well, you know what? That is a phrase that we are familiar with and that we hear. And yet I suspect that most people have no idea where it comes from. So here you are to tell all.
For a minute there, I thought you were going to say, that's a phrase that I never hear. No, and no, I could have spoken. I won't waste it. I could have spoken about the other suggested topic, but I do a slightly different one. And what the heck? It's because I do the. Going to talk about the 7 ages of man, and I agree with you. It's a thing. It's like the planetary hours. People just go blah blah, and then they rush to Pluto, they rush to Sedna, they rush to the latest comet, they rush to, and these are all very, very basic things, and they're all linked, of course, to the Chaldean order of the planets, which I'm very much interested into being a traditional astrologer. I can use Pluto and all that, but I'm more interested in other things. And I did a few years ago. I got invited to a group to speak. I can't even remember where it was. It was somewhere outside. I don't know why they invited me. I've never met any of them. And this was a subject I decided to talk about because I'd spoken about it a couple of times. And each time at the end, because you know what it's like. You give a talk and then people go, they put on that sort of simpering face, which means do my chart. So I just get fed up with it and I said, I'll do bloody everybody's okay, and that's it, because I don't know, I made sure I had enough time. And I was quite shocked at how accurate I was. These were total strangers, like most of the people that you give talks to about it. And I began to investigate it further. And it's something that I always look at. I don't know if you read my last article in Barbie in the Astrological Journal, and I actually discuss the Mercury, Venus, and Sun periods and why it was important to the success of Barbie. So that was.
I think we need to, for those who are completely unfamiliar to this concept, just go back and
I will.
say,
I just want to know that it is them to know it's important. And I'm going to tell them about it, but it's something I very recently had a little bit about it published, and I'm halfway through a book on this obscure subject. So, what it is there are 7 planets in traditional astrology. They're Moon, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn. I'm sure quite a lot of astrologers know that they don't use Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. They follow the same order as for the planetary hours. And the 7 ages of man was outlined by Claudius Ptolemy over 2,000 years ago. And basically what it does, it assigns specific periods, time periods, years of your life under a specific planet's rule, so that your life is one continuum chopped into time zones, do you understand, of years. And it's a personal predictive system. It's not some sort of weird, wonderful system that only applies to my chart or your chart. It applies because it's the kind of system we all know how it starts and we all know how it ends. It starts the second we're born and it ends when we die. So I think it's very pertinent to everybody. And I don't think people realise that about this system. And I will. I've got something to show you. I'll just show you very briefly because a picture, as they say, paints 1,000 words. Obviously, we're doing her. I've called it Notes on the Future because that's exactly what we're doing. We're trying to work out what these periods of years will have. So they've reflected the planet's synodic cycle with the sun. This is just how long it takes a planet and the sun to move in a circle and get back together to the exact same degree in the zodiac when they started. I'll just take that down again. Because people looked at the sky and saw the sun and moon and the seasonal cycles and the monthly cycles and the daily cycles, and then they began to notice bigger cycles like eclipses and the planets return to the same position. So these were called the planetary years. I'm sorry, this is I should have the symbols down here, and for some reason I've left them off because this should be the moon, Mercury, Venus, the Sun, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn. I will amend that and send it to you that you can show up and people can screenshot it. Thank you for that, Anna. I didn't realise I hadn't shared. And they correspond to specific ages from being born to your 4th birthday, which is the end of your 3rd year. And this is where people get confused because you say things like 4 to 14, but actually we start at 0. It's a bit like profections, if you see. It ties in quite well with profections on your 4th birthday and your 14th. And to old age, Saturn starts on your 6th to 8th birthday and runs until whenever you die. Have you got that? And obviously there's a humoral content in these. So the moon's cold and wet, as is Venus, basically. And I find interesting about this, and I always, you know me, Anna, I always put the humoral nature in because I think it's very, and the sort of gender of the planet. I can't believe I don't have this. Let me just, because the thing about Saturn, even, the Saturn, it's cold and dry. It's known as masculine because cold was a sort of active force in those days, so actively promoted coldness, if that thing. But the thing about the moon and Venus, they're also cold. Saturn's cold and dry, and Venus and the moon are cold and wet. Let me just do this because I don't want people to be confused. 1 second, I can't believe this. Is that better?
Yes, I think that will be very helpful.
I'm sorry, I don't know how that happened. Well, I do have missed it off. That's how it happened. This is so unlike me. Yes, folks, is there any start to my talent? So we go through every year of it. So we all go through these years from birth to the day we die. Every one of us, it doesn't matter who you are. You can't skip a stage. You can't jump from Mercury to the sun. We've got to go through every single one. And these are developmental stages. And more than just being developmental, they actually affect our fortunes, our changing attitudes, and they reflect the changing experiences that we come to and the changing events that we encounter for a period of time, so that you can look back and think, oh, that's interesting. During my Venus period, this happened. During my Sun period, something else happened. And because I've been doing this ever such a long time, I've been looking at it since round about my 21st birthday when I first discovered this. And I don't think about it every single day, but it is something I do look at in people's charts. So anyone that's looking can take a screenshot of that. Thank you. Let me just see. Nah, you don't need to know that. They're all allocated due to planetary periods. So what that means, I'll put this, I'll stop sharing a minute and just chat with you. So what that means, it's you look at a planet where it is conjunct the sun, and for example, it takes Mars, it does 15 conjunctions of this, it does in 15 years, it does so many conjunctions with the sun back to, so that you started at 0 degrees Aries with Mars conjuncted the sun. It's going to take 15 years for that to happen again, which people go on and on about Saturn returns. But to be honest, you've got returns of Venus every 8 years. You've got Mercury returns every 10 years. You've got Jupiter returns. And I do actually look for these kind of things in people's charts because it's very important. And if anyone reads Vettius Valens, I'm trying to keep this as general as I can. He uses planetary returns. And if he's looking to a certain house, so say Mars is a perfect, say he's looking at something to do with Scorpio or Aries, these signs rise and set at different times of the year in different countries. And he takes that rising time and adds the planetary period to it to get an actual year for his predictions. And it's quite common. So there's a lot of stuff you can do like that. I don't tend to do that normally. That's something I do when I'm being geeky. Sorry, Anna, when I'm being geeky myself, like we all do. And but it is useful for looking at charts and seeing where people are most likely to succeed. Do you have any questions or feel?
Yeah, I think it would be good to just come back to the actual experience of each of the planets as expressed through the different ages. So what you're saying is that these periods in time these are developmental stages in human life.
Yes.
It makes sense to me that the moon would be first, absolutely, because it's a time when we most need nurturing.
Yeah.
Except that Mercury would be next, because we're going to school. There's a huge developmental leap in understanding and learning at that point. So we can see where the sun, this is where we're coming into our power, discovering who we are.
Yeah.
That they make sense. So my question to you is, although these are truths that are universal for every human being because they speak to our humanity and our development, how does this then connect back to the natal chart, to the individual's experience at different phases in life?
Okay, I'm going to share my screen now. Okay, and I know what to do. I've got the first one. I'm going to do, unusually, I'm going to do two people, and it's called A Pair of Charlies, and then we'll look at both together for the differences and then separately. So let me just share the screen again. I'm getting the hang of this. This is called A Pair of Charlies, okay, and this is two very well-known people, but so that's Prince Charles on the left, or King Charles, as he is now the third, and on the other side there's Charles Manson. And I picked these people just randomly. It doesn't matter who you pick, but this worked out quite well. And this is how you begin interpreting it. So we start from what I was going to say about the moon. And so moon rules babies, it rules mother, and it rules the vegetable realm. And if you think, and it rules reaping and sowing too. So it's the moon's where we're planted. So the first thing the moon's going to tell you is, how exactly are you thriving? Are you going to thrive in these formative years? And people would say stupid things to me. Oh, look, Leo's rising, so that's a royal chart. And I think, well, it doesn't really matter. It's Prince Charles, for God's sake. We know he's royal, so you don't need to be a detective to know that, because Charles Manson wasn't royal, and he's only got voting on Taurus rising. So these are the kind of things that I think people say. And secondly, if we're going to be like that, this is a nocturnal chart, so it's governed by the moon anyway. So the moon is more important. But it is for the first 4 years of his life, he has got the moon in Taurus. It's exalted in Taurus in the terms of Venus, and it's in the 10th house. I mean, to me, that's a pretty good place for the first part of your life. He's obviously being well nurtured in that place. He's exalted, so he's well looked after, and he's in a very, very good. He's highly exalted as a prince would be. He wasn't heir to the throne or anything in those days, because his mum didn't become in line to the throne until he was 5. At this time, he was just Prince Charles, sort of minor royal. No one had abdicated. And then if we look at this chart, So that tells us quite a lot about those first formative years. And what I also want to say is important about the moon in Taurus, exalted, because the moon is also the mother, just in a general sort of astrological interpretation. In a nighttime chart, the moon is the mother, in a daytime chart, it's Venus, and it's an exalted mum. So it just says something about the mother-baby relationship, because the mother's the one that traditionally nurtures the baby, which are represented by the same planet. So that's interesting, because the other thing I wanted to tell you about this system is, if planets are in aspect with each other, it does indicate, I've discovered, a continuation between one period and the next. So if it's a sextile or a trine or a conjunction, it's usually works out. There's no less bumps, it's a transition. And if it's oppositions and squares, usually quite a bumpy transition between things. And if they're in aversion, they're completely, it's almost like an opposition. One thing happens, then another thing happens. And if we look, for example, at Charles, who's got this nice sort of exalted childhood when his needs are cared for, it's suddenly he's in opposition to Mercury the next time period for 10 years. So from 4 to 14, he's got this planet, and it's in opposition because the moon's at 0 degrees Taurus. Got that?
Mm.
And the person who looked after his education to start with and his development was his mum, and then it was his dad. I know that's not the 4th house, but it's almost as if Charles became his property, because Prince Philip was quite strict about where he was going to, wasn't he? He's going to Gordon, he's going to do this, he's going to do that. And it was quite different. And and Mercury's got no essential dignity it's still a good house, it's a fortunate house, but it isn't opposition to the moon, so it did change. And Charles was actually sent to a school, which was that he wasn't homeschooled like royals had been before him. He was the first one that went to a school for his education, and he had this for 10 years. And then his father, when he was about 13 or 14, sent him to, I think he was about 14, 15, sent him to Gordon, which people say he had a terrible time. He was bullied and things like that. And we can see now that Venus isn't an aspect to either Mercury, it's an aversion to both of them, or the moon. So but it is interesting, it's in the 4th house. And so I would expect this was quite a good time for Charles, and it's dignified in its own sign. So we've gone from dignified period, neither here nor there period, probably less dignity in that. And this does help your timing when you're doing charts and things. What about this? I hear you say. Well, Charles actually has said publicly, because people say, he says it was like coldness and kilts and all this kind of stuff, this teenage year that he had with his bullied. But if you look, it's got a very wide, it's not got a wide at all, it's got a wide sextile from Jupiter, and he said it wasn't that bad, and it was character building, etc., etc. And despite getting bullied because he was a prince, he really enjoyed it and he was happy in it, and it gave him a good wide view of the world and how to look after yourself. So you can start looking at like any other astrological chart, you can start looking at the aspects from the planets, from all of these. And the other thing then, Venus is, it's music. And Charles played the cello there and became an accomplished musician, and an artist, which he remains to his day. So not only did he have to go for cold showers and have this healthy body, which Charles has got, but he was instructed in arts too. We'll have a quick look here. Now, this is a different chart. This is Charles Manson, who we all know as that horrible helter-skelter man from the ended the 1960s, Love and Peace, by getting everyone killed. This is a diurnal chart, so the moon is out of sect, which the moon's not comfortable in this environment, because the moon, if it is best in the hemisphere away from the sun, and so it's not the best place, and it's still in the 10th house, so it's a very prominent place, but it's not dignified in any way, and it's actually with its dispositor Saturn, cold, dry Saturn, and so the moon's not really happy here, so it doesn't look like the best childhood. And if you read Tetrabiblos, even Saturn, if it's dignified, doesn't get a very good press. It's a lot worse actually, when it's worse. And it is, for example, it's like square Jupiter and all this. And because it's a daytime planet, Venus is the mum, and the mother is very wide square to the moon itself. A lot of these things work best in whole sign houses, I'm afraid to say. It's a bit like synastry, works on 30-degree segments, and there's other bits of Ptolemy, particularly when he's describing the seasons, which he does talk about 30-degree segments of signs. So I don't want any of the non-whole sign people hitting me. I do use loads of other house systems. Anna, any questions about this?
Well, no, but what I'm looking at is that in both of the charts you've chosen, there is a moon conjunction to the North Node, particularly.
That's just coincidence. I didn't pick them.
Yes, I know, but I guessed that it would be coincidence, but I do think it's still significant because these are both two very famous people.
Exactly.
You have the moon at the top of the chart in a conjunction with that North Node.
I agree.
But separate to that, coming back to the issue or the question of development and the childhood, would you, when you're looking at those conjunctions to the North Node, be making any observations as regards what that would mean for the childhood? In other words, is there any meaning in this context to these conjunctions?
Yeah, these are at the these aren't at the turnings, so these are less stable. I mean, they're both fixed signs as well. I'm at the turnings planet, which are square to the nodes. Ptolemy says, but since it's his system, I use his. That these planets are more stable anyway, less likely to be keen on change and further development and things like that. Whereas at the very peak of their cycle, where they're furthest away from the nodes, they're more prone to the idea of change, and a bit more flexibility is indicated. I think Joseph, sorry.
Well, it makes me wonder whether this speaks of an element of destiny here, that the way that these children were nurtured has an impact. So, I mean, it is an obvious statement that the way that children are nurtured is going to, in some way, impact who they become. But here, there seems to be just it's like that's true with knobs on kind of thing.
Yes. I only picked these because I thought, there's Charles Manson, and it wasn't like he said. To be honest, we've only got an hour to talk, and this is something you could do like the plan with 3 hours, days and days and days. It's a taster. I also think too the difference between this chart is the exalted moon. This one is a Duff moon. They're both going to become well known because I'm 10,000. And Saturn is this is a part of spirit. This is why I like AstroSeek. It does it all for you. But so it's going to, and it's conjunct Saturn. So it's in the sign of Mars, and that's two malefic influences. So it doesn't really speak volumes from being nice. And of course, Saturn's a fall from a great height as well. But it's very sort of intractably not great, because it's not exalted. Do you know what I mean? Like Saturn's the one that's got the dignity here, not the moon. Oddly enough, Joan Crawford, whose date of birth isn't exactly known within 24 hours, has got a moon conjunct Saturn, and so it's quite useful in sorry, I'm digressing, but it's quite useful even looking at charts where you don't know the time, because if you know the day, at least you can get an idea of what periods might be easier for one person or another. Does that make sense? So
Yeah.
it is useful. I mean, we can look and see what else Charles has got. He's got Jupiter in Sagittarius, Mars with its strong dispositor, you know, in a hot and dry sign. That's a good period. The Jupiter period's when he got the law changed that he could marry Camilla. There was a few things on in the background post Diana that worked to his advantage. You see, Mars does rule the 9th house of legal matters, and this is sort of connivances. This is sex, isn't it? And a few other things which he became more public to. It's a sort of a regal kind of house where everything's on display. Sun was neither here nor there. This goes from age 22 to 41, you know, where he was with Diana. And Mercury, it's Mars ruled again. They're in aversion, both of them, to Mars. So Mars isn't offering any help. We look at Manson. It's his old age that's, because this is 68 and onwards. I don't know what age he died not that long ago. I think he was about 80 odds anyway when he died. But I mean, there's nothing particularly fantastic or resounding about any of these planetary placements. That's the strongest planet in the chart, isn't it? It's Saturn. And if you read Lily's descriptions of Saturn as a significator of a person's temperament, it's someone small, dark beady eyes, lank hair, stooping, shuffling about, because Charles Manson was a bit like that. I mean, I'm not blaming Charles, as you say, I'm not blaming Charles Manson for any of this, because I just think we're born, that's it. But one of the first things I did say was this: I think of the moon like a plant. You stick it on a window ledge, and does it get watered? Is it a drafty? Does it get sun? Does it get this? Does it get that? And I found this to be really, really, really interesting. Looking at charts, would you like to see the charts on their own? Just look at theirs.
Yeah.
Charles, I've done both to make it look easier, and we can look at. It's a bit tidier that way, you see. So his moon already, it's not even peaked, because it's still got to peak just by motion of the diurnal motion of the heavens, the primary.
So
around, yeah.
if we're looking then at these different phases, and we're looking at the Charles chart here, would you have deduced by looking at his chart through these stages of development when he might have risen in power and in status to king?
Do you know, that's very interesting. This is slightly off the track. I would be more interested in the sect light for starters, because it's so high, because it's the sect light is his life, and it's exalted. That's the first thing I would pay attention to. And then by progression, I would look at perfections, and I would probably look and see what something like the Sun or Jupiter was doing. But would I automatically see him as being king? I don't know, is the honest answer. But I think he would be somebody just because of the moon. That's why.
Actually, I was more asking in terms of timing.
Timing.
As to, by looking these different developmental stages, when one might have guessed would be the moment at which he rose to kingship.
I see what you mean now. I'd be looking to Jupiter, actually, which would be 56 to 68. I would be more inclined to look at this here, because Jupiter.
So why would you have done that? Because
Jupiter's in Sagittarius.
Indeed, but my instinct would have been to look to the midheaven and to look to Mars. Well, clearly that didn't happen. So that's why I was wondering, you know, why would you have looked at Jupiter?
Because Jupiter's dispositing Mars, that's why. So they're linked, they're in this, it's like every other planet. The sun and Mercury are linked to Mars. It's not aspecting, but Jupiter's directly dictating what Mars is going to be doing.
That's obvious. Yeah.
And they're consecutive. And the other thing is, it's a consecutive time period. Jupiter follows from Mars. So I just thought, that's interesting. That's the period I would have looked at. I mean, I've got another chart where I'd look to Saturn. That's what I would look at, because these aren't particularly, they're angular, but they've got no dignity. That's angular with tons of dignity. It's in haze. The moon's incredibly strong in Charles's chart. Saturn, it's neither here nor there, but these two, this is the most powerful, I think. I know it rules the 8th and I know it rules the 12th, and knowing that it is Prince Charles when I first did it, I know I'm familiar with William's chart in whole sign, and he's got his mate hidden in the 12th house. I just think these people are trapped anyway, and it is the exaltation ruler of that sign. But that, to me, I would be interested in.
Yes, and yet he is much older. He's in Saturn's phase.
Yes, exactly. So I don't know the answer.
Yeah, it's just it was just an interesting.
Although they did with Camilla, they did up her status, and they sort of brought Charles more to the fore. I didn't think the Queen would ever die, because she's just. And she almost, she just went on forever, and so they did at least try and up him in the royalty stakes, because he was an ex. But as to when he was king, that'd be a set of different predictive techniques. But these were very important years for him. These were post Diana and Camilla. So I think that's what I would have gone with. But you're right, it was with Saturn.
Interesting. It's just interesting to see it playing out in the individual's life.
Let's look at the other one. Charles Manson. I want to go through a few people, because I want to talk about stelliums and things like that too, which, there's another one there. Charles Manson. The thing about stelliums is, there's another word that annoys me. Oh, they've got a stellium in Pisces. And I said, what does that mean? Well, they've got all the planets in Pisces. They're all very Piscean. I think, what does that mean? Well, the dustbin of the zodiac doesn't really tell me anything. This is a stellium, everybody, in Scorpio. So I would expect that to be a busy period, and be a lot of Mars influence. So we need to see how Mars is doing. And Mars is in the 5th house. And one of the things the 5th house is sex. So Mars is controlling all these little chickies and people from the 7th house, which is it's one of the, apart from that, it's the first thing that jumps out of me, that this 5th house Mars, and that's how he controlled all the family, the men and the women. He had sex with them all, and he got more members in with the promise of sex. But if we're looking at the start, he's prominent, and it's with Saturn, so we'll really briefly discuss that. His second bit would be Mercury, which is also in the terms of Mars, if we can see from here. And so Mars is still influencing that, and his Mars and Mercury give you good at thieving and crime, and that's what he was in and out of a borsal and romance home and jail most of his. In fact, till he was about 23, he spent practically 2/3 of his life in boys' home, remand homes, and things. Or the other thing, his mother didn't want him. His mother abandoned him, and this rule anyway. The Mars rules the 12th house of imprisonment, confinement. Dorothea says calamity, chaos, and so I do feel a bit sorry for him because of that. That Mars did influence these 3 consecutive periods. So it would be Mercury, Venus, then the Sun, and it would itself be influenced by Mercury, so he didn't really have the best sort of 4 to 14-year-old life. By that time and I think when he was 15, he first went to prison, which was the Venusian thing, and the fact that Venus is under sunbeams doesn't bode very well for that period of time either. So anything, Anna? It's just interesting. I
Yeah.
can't explain it all in like the hour we have. You know, it's
No, but it is, I mean, clearly it's a fascinating technique to use, because it does show so much. It's this chart, such an emphasis in the seventh house. It
yes,
be meaningful. The fact that it's in Scorpio has got to be meaningful. Everything's got to
yes,
be meaningful.
yeah,
And as you pointed out, Mars is the dispositor of all of those planets in the seventh and of the 12th house.
yes,
We've got a situation where, going back to the moon, his mother rejects him. That moon is not just in Aquarius, but it is, Saturn is in Aquarius also. It's not a conjunction, but he is the dispositor of the moon,
yeah,
is the 10th house we're looking at. So there's all of these hints that all is not well here.
yeah. Because he's an undignified and he's uncomfortably placed. Because the whole point of sex is comfort and being with your peers. He's with none of them. That one's absolutely fine there, and this one's in haze, and it's just fascinating. I'll go on to. I don't know how long we've got left. We're always on the thing. We must get together and talk about all this. I'm going to go on to the next one, which is always a stellium, and it's Kylie Minogue. Because I just thought I'll go for someone completely different now. Kylie Minogue is interesting. She's, by my reckoning, what's 1968, and she's six. She must be whatever age it is, because here's another. Hey, everyone, she's got a stellium. So we'll look at Kylie Minogue now. But this is rather interesting. You've got Moon, Mercury, Venus, Sun, and Mars, all of these 5 periods, and they're sequential. If you notice, they're all being governed by Mercury, which is the second one in the sequence. So whatever happens to her from the 4 to 14 age range is what's going to have an impact on all this. Okay, we'll start with her birth. Now, she's got a moon in the 12th house, and it's an undignified moon because it doesn't have any essential dignity, and it's also it's just slowly starting to emerge from the sunbeams. It's still there. You wouldn't see it in the sky, so it's still sort of new moonish. This moon hidden, and so it's not the greatest moon yet, and it's just left Mars, which I think is interesting, and it's also, this is where the aspects begin. You can sort of see it's besieged by Mars and Saturn, and she did. Her family moved around a bit for a couple of years because to better themselves, and they did. That's exactly what happened. But it's just rather interesting that it's all taking place in the 12th house. And the thing, if you think about a big star like Kylie Minogue, because there's no point pretending she's sold squillions of albums, and she's as photographed as the Queen probably was, in a fashion plate. She keeps herself very, very private, and so it's not like Charles Manson, an awful start to life, because she's with at least a decent planet this time. She's with Mercury itself, its dispositor, controlling it in the 12th house, and it's in the terms of Venus, which it's a slightly bit itself being controlled by Mercury. So it's a slightly better configuration. And it is interesting, she had a mum, dad, a brother, and a sister, and there's 5 of them. I just think that's a sort of the coincidence in astrology that you can't make up. So that's that. But if we go to the next period, apparently it's school, which is this, when you go to school from year 4 to year 14, traditional, then she was a very slightly anxious girl, and she didn't make friends very easily, and sort of kept herself to herself, which I found was interesting. And she did get a few hard times with people, because of course her sister was in showbiz and she was a sort of a show busy herself, did a bit of singing and that. But it looks as if the education would be okay. That time period would be fine for her, because Mercury is dignified. So that she must have had some sort of talents that were hidden. that she's kept with her throughout her whole life. And Mercury's in the terms of Saturn, so it's not going to be the chattiest. And this is a sign which is capable of speech. And modern astrology says this is a chatty sign of the zodiac. It's capable of speech. If it wants to speak, it will. And I just think I've got this theory that this is that Mercury is the go-between between our passions. So Mercury makes sense of everything that comes into your body, and Venus is the sort of things that leach out of it. Does that make sense to you? The things, the passions that you get acclimatized to because you decide whether that's good or bad, whether you like it or not. And this is how we develop our sort of more passionate nature. We're attracted to things because we have different experiences, so we don't reveal everything. And it's interesting. Venus is her like 14 to 22, where her career really took off, and she became an actress, and that's under the auspices of Mercury. And traditionally, singers, the best singers, came about when Mercury was retrograding towards Venus. But Mercury Venus, as you know, gives you a propensity to dramatic arts, oration. And if it's contacted by Jupiter, which indeed they both are, Mercury is, it gives you good oration, oratory skills, good at communicating with people. So it's quite useful because she has reached a very wide audience, not through politics, because she's not known for that. It's interesting. And the sun again. So all this Mars, it's all directed, it's all being guided by Mercury, which rules the third house of communication and the 12th house of secrets, which is quite interesting because they do say she's just a puppet. What do you think of that? It's more interesting.
I'm not sure I have much to add, actually.
It is interesting. Oddly enough, the other person who's got a stellium like that, Cilla Black, and I keep thinking that's why she became famous. What I didn't mention in Charles or either of the Charles's charts is what Kylie Minogue has here, because if you look, Mercury's at the astroseek is in Saturn's terms, and Saturn's actually acting as a spear bearer for both for the sun. If you have a look on all these other, Mercury's sort of a spear bearer or lady in waiting for the moon, and this sun and moon being well protected in Ptolemy is a sign that you're well looked after and catered for, and that you will be more successful. I'm sure you know that anyway. And it's just interesting. That's exactly what she's got. She's got Saturn, so she's got this sort of about her. She doesn't want anyone to know this fortitude that will get her through, that's controlling Mercury. So it's interesting. Now, what I was looking at, I thought so it's 56 to 68, so 1960. So by my reckoning, there's 2 more years before this Jupiter period takes over. And interestingly, it's not governed by Mercury, and Saturn's not governed by Mercury either. And I think this is quite interesting. Is she going to go back to Australia? Is she going to be ill? Because she's already had some breast cancer scares. And as for the Saturn, I don't really know what to make of it. But I think she's about 55. Yeah, she's so in another. So the 56th birthday, she will start her Jupiter period, and it'll be interesting to see what she does with that. I don't think she'll go into politics or find religion, but she might do something more humanitarian or it's just interesting, I think.
I'll tell you what I'm thinking outside of the individuals. I think it's very interesting to me that Jupiter should be heralding a phase late 50s and through the 60s.
Yeah.
And maybe this is a juxtaposition between our cultural values now versus what they used to be, because very negative attitude to aging in our culture, whereas in Ptolemy's day that would not have been the case, because as people aged, they were elders, and there was respect and possibly even a rise in status, an
Yes.
extension of status, which would not have been, which we, it's probably quietly possibly true to a certain extent now, but I think that for a lot of people coming into this age is a very frightening, or this phase in life is very frightening. Many of them feel that they've become unemployable, and heaven forbid they could lose their jobs, because they're going to find it difficult to find other jobs. So I think that when looking at clients' charts as Jupiter is going into that phase, it may be helpful in terms of helping us to perhaps encourage or nurture different attitudes
Yes.
phase in life. And you know, they do say that middle age is the most stressful time, because you've got issues with the children, you've got parents who are aging, your career may be a little bit iffy, or you know, if you're unlucky. So there's all these different things here that play out and put pressure on people from 40s into into to retirement very often. So I think that having this perspective, I like it because it's the way that I normally
Yeah,
look.
yeah.
So it's just highlighting
To
me.
be honest with you, I have written about this in my book, that because I've written that we're like a stopped clock, we're stuck in the age of Venus, and it's surely we should be looking at astrologists taking this rather than a cosmetics company or advertising, because well, you've got all these do you know what I mean, with lips and everyone dressing like far too young. I've actually mentioned this, and you're quite right. I've been an ophthalmic nurse for 40 years, and because of I'm 42 now, but because of my age, I'm seen as a sort of one-trick pony, and I've got all this experience, and all these young kids don't get that. And this is exactly how I feel, and I'm 66. I've got 2 more years to go, and you're quite right. I have actually thought about this too, and thank you for bringing that up. Yes, and I think she will go great. Whatever she decides to do, she'll go gracefully, do something sensible with it, because Jupiter is in Leo, so it's a dignified Jupiter. It does rule her 9th house and her 6th house. I don't know that it will necessarily be illness, and it is trine Saturn. So there's a, do you know, but desire and passion are two different things. So she'll get a desire. I think she'll have a desire and a clear way ahead, because she doesn't put her foot wrong, because she's got this Mercury has been controlling all that, and they are still in the Saturn doesn't look so good in Aries, but the Saturn's got dignity. It's in Haze because it's a masculine sign. In the nocturnal chart, it's above the horizon too. So this isn't such a bad planet. So I don't think we'll hear the end of her, but I think it'll be more interesting. But you're quite right about the Jupiter and the Saturn age. In fact, I'm going to go to Joe Biden's chart next, do you mind? Because that was one of the ones, because you've said this, and it's interesting, he became president at what age, 79 or something, which is well into this Saturn age. And he's also got a stellium governed by Mars this time. And Mars is a spear bearer to the sun, as is Jupiter, if you take it that way. And he was incredibly sporty, as well as being a good businessman. And but I hear what you're saying, and this is an exalted Jupiter, where he worked for other people, exalted. And then he became president, and the Saturn is actually angular at the end of the day. It's bang on the descendant, and it is a triplicity ruler. It's got some dignity there as well. Have I got the wrong charts here? Yes, I have. That one's wrong, right? That's not his. So it is interesting. It is interesting, this chart, that became angular, and this is the setting place for your life. Traditionally, you know, your infancy, youth, adulthood, old age. And some people say, and it's interesting at the start, at his old age, this Saturn's the planet that would be prominent, and that it has dignity and some strength there. I just think that's an interesting point you made, because I agree with you. Most people wouldn't look at this till they're older, but it's worth astrologers exploring it again on all levels.
I think it is interesting. So I guess perhaps you could stop sharing the screen, Trav.
Yes.
So that we can actually see each other. I think that this is the value that I see in playing with this is that, well, firstly, it's showing us that psychological astrology is older than people think.
Yeah.
Yet again, we can see how traditionally psychology was looked at, even if it wasn't called psychology.
Yes.
That to me, that is very fascinating in itself. But what I like about this is just looking at those developmental stages, and as you say, if you haven't got a time of birth, you can still see quite a lot about how the individual did at each developmental stage.
Or will do.
It's adding more. Will do. So it's adding more information to the picture.
Yeah.
More nuance. And I think too that it's also helpful to think about how in different times, different phases were regarded. So I thank you very much for this.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Now, if people wanted to find your book,
it's not out. It's not out yet. I'm just going to tidy it up and then present it. I don't know. Do you know? I was writing a sun sign book, and halfway through, a voice in my head told me to do this instead, because I'd half done it. So I'm just finishing it off. I went with my inner voice, but cross your fingers. It needs done. It needs to be done, doesn't it?
So we had a sneak preview of your book.
Yeah. Very
sneak. Out, we will want to know about it. So tell us then, how do people find you?
They can find me on my website, the Astrological Explorer.
Thank you very much. I think that's very apt, because it seems to me that you are always exploring different aspects of astrology. So I think that's very apt. Is that .com or .co.uk?
Oh, just put in, you can either put Trav Travers, the Astrological Explorer. I haven't updated it for a while, because I told you I'd been ill, and now I'm back, but it will discuss the planetary years and things like that they could.
Good. Thank you so much, Trav.
Thank you. I'm sorry that was a bit of a splat fest, but it's a big subject, actually.
It's a huge subject.
Yeah.
So thank you very much. And thank you all for watching. Next time, we're going to be looking at the Olympian family. And do remember to go to the Astrolog's website, which I'll put a link for in the description box, if you want to take part, or if you want to join the Karmic Astrology Seminar coming up in April, in which I will be taking part in, as well as Stephen Forrest and other wonderful astrologers. Until next time, goodbye.
Goodbye. Thank you, Anna. Goodbye.